Boyfriend of 2 years cheated while a dream house for our kids was in sight. Now he's pleading for counseling. I've been with my boyfriend for 2 years, and it's honestly been a wonderful, fun, caring, and kind relationship. He has a son, and I have 2 kids. All the kids have met and become good friends. We'd even begun discussing moving in together, buying a house, no less, since we'd need enough space for everyone. Yesterday morning, the chaos of kids swirling around, I couldn't find my phone, a usual occurrence. I asked him to call it, which he did. It rang endlessly, going to voicemail as he got distracted with the kids. Eventually, I found my phone and went to fetch his. And there it was, still unlocked in my hand. Let me just mention, I have never looked at his phone, not once. I've never even had a glimmer of suspicion that I needed to, but as I'm picking it up, a message pops up from someone named Paula. I don't know any Paula, and I've met all his friends and family. In fact, my kids and I spent all of Christmas with his family, his extended family included, which was amazing and full of joy. My stomach flipped. Against every instinct, I opened the message. Suddenly, I'm hit with a flurry of explicit photos and messages sent from him to this Paula. I had to steady myself. I ran to hide in the washroom, frantically taking screen photos with my own phone. Scrolling through as fast as possible, I tried to convince myself this might be old, maybe I was getting it all wrong. I figured I'd look at it later, when I could breathe. After getting what evidence I could, about 7 photos, I turned off his phone without checking the dates or reading more, and handed it back when he came looking for it. Then he was off to hockey practice. It wasn't until I sat down and started going through these screenshots that I saw the truth. There was no doubt, this was someone he was actively involved with. The dates and times lined up with the exact times I wasn't with him, when he was supposedly out with friends or running errands like groceries or laundry. He'd been seeing this woman every opportunity I wasn't around. Reading further, I discovered she was also a mother who lived not far from me. Thank God I didn't know her. And then, the final punch, they'd slept together on Valentine's Day. 2 hours before I came over for what I thought was a romantic, home-cooked meal, candles, music, dancing, and plenty of sex. My hands were shaking as I realized what this meant. I didn't want to act out of rage, but if it were me, I'd want to know. So, I called her. Her number was at the top of the screen. I could already tell she had no idea about me. Her messages sounded like she was in a full-on relationship, even thanking him for being such a positive influence on her son, who adored him. I dialed her, heart pounding, and asked quietly if she knew him. She did, of course. Then I told her, gently, that I was his girlfriend, and we'd been together 2 years. She burst into tears. Obviously, she had no idea, and I felt so sorry for both of us. We decided to meet while Mr. Wonderful was at hockey. When we did, we compared notes. She had started dating him the exact same week I did. He'd been cheating on me for 2 years, slotting in both of us into his schedule. As she told it, he'd begun to pull away from her about a year ago, which made sense. Around that time, I became part of his family, our kids met, we started traveling together. Still, he never ended things with her. Their relationship shifted into something more like friends with benefits, but it stung even worse when I realized they'd only used the pill as birth control. Meanwhile, since we'd been together so long and I can't get pregnant, we hadn't been using anything. So besides betraying my trust, he also put my health at risk. Yes, I scheduled a doctor's appointment for the next day to be tested. Together, we decided to confront him. His son would be gone for the afternoon, thank God for birthday parties, so I went over first, left the front door unlocked, and started making tea. When she arrived, there was no hesitation. She charged in, punched him straight in the face, and just let him have it. I was shaking so badly, listening to her call him out for using and lying to her for 2 years. And him? Nothing. He apologized but offered no excuses. After she left, I had to help her up from the floor. She was sobbing so hard, I waited for him to explain. Still nothing. He had no answer, no words for why he didn't stop, why he hurt both of us so deeply. Since reasoning with him went nowhere, I told him the least he could do was confess to his family. When his son came home, I sat with them as he told the poor boy what he'd done. The look on his son's face broke me, and I was the one who ended up consoling the child. Then, because his parents lived nearby, I went with him and his son to his parents' house and watched as he admitted everything to his parents. They were floored and both in tears. Now that the initial shock has faded, I'm left with questions. I do love this man. We'd shared such amazing times, and he always seemed so honest. I'd never trusted anyone more, and he destroyed all of it. Now he's pleading for us to go to counseling together. But I don't see how counseling can fix lying, or stop him chasing someone else if he gets bored with me. If I'd been enough, he would have stayed faithful. I also can't see how counseling would help me let myself try again. All I can think to do now is ask, has anyone, in your own experience, found any healing, any hope, after something like this? Has counseling actually helped after being devastated by a cheating partner? Update 1. After everything that happened between us, I knew there were loose ends I couldn't just walk away from. Over the course of 2 weeks, I found myself talking to his ex. She was understandably in pieces. She needed closure, and for whatever reason, I felt compelled to help her get it. I reached out to my ex and suggested he meet up with her one last time. To make it easier for them, I even offered to watch his son while they talked. He promised he would only be gone for an hour, but 2 hours passed before he returned. Later, I learned they met up, sat in her car, and talked. He swore nothing happened between them, but at that point, I honestly didn't care anymore. I spoke to her afterward, and she was so grateful that I made it possible for her to say goodbye. That chapter was closed, unfinished business number 1, finally done. Meanwhile, I had been spending quite a bit of time talking to his son over the past couple of weeks. The poor boy carried a mountain of trust issues, which wasn't surprising given everything he'd been through. After discussing it with my ex, he arranged for therapy sessions that would include his son, and I encouraged his son repeatedly to truly speak his mind during those sessions. We even sat down together with my ex's mother, who also agreed that this step was necessary. Only then did I begin to feel comfortable that his son would have the chance to advocate for himself going forward. Unfinished business number 2, checked off the list. But there was still the final, most painful unfinished business, my own closure. Every day, my ex continued to text me. He even showed up on my doorstep more than once, desperate to talk through the betrayal. He made promise after promise, swearing he would never cheat again, that he'd put me first, that he'd be mindful of my feelings, give me the respect I deserved. The works. It was always too little, too late. Then today something happened that finally broke the spell. His son asked me if I'd come to his hockey practice. I was feeling steady enough, thinking I could handle being in the same room as my ex, who, as a coach, would be out on the ice and not near me, so I said yes. I drove 20 minutes and sat in the stands, actually enjoying myself for the first time in a while. After practice, everyone filed off the ice and started getting changed. I ran into the ex and his son in the atrium. His son, full of energy, asked his dad for a hot chocolate. My ex nodded, went to the canteen counter, and bought his son a hot chocolate and grabbed himself a coffee. And there I was, standing right beside them. Never once did he even turn to ask if I wanted something, not even a thought as to whether I'd like a drink or a simple "can I get you anything?" In that moment, the truth hit me like ice water. This was what my life would be if I stayed with him, invisible, unconsidered, always an afterthought. No, I didn't need anything from the canteen, the point wasn't the drink. I had made the effort to show up for his son when he asked for me, yet my own needs didn't cross his mind for a second. That stung more than anything else. I hugged his son goodbye and told him he could text me if he needed anything. Then I turned to the ex, said goodbye, and walked away without looking back. For all I know, he's still standing in that atrium, confused about what just happened. I've deleted him from my phone. There can't be any more contact. I haven't quite found it in myself to cut ties with his family on social media yet. My heart just isn't ready, but I know soon enough, I'll need to. I don't want reminders of a life I once thought I could have. Because now I know, it was all an illusion. Update 2. I thought that would be the last big wave. It wasn't. His mother called that afternoon, asking if I could come by to pick up a few things. I nearly said no, and then I heard her voice catch and said yes. She had a small cardboard box waiting on the entry table, my scarf, a pair of socks my daughter left, a mug I bought at a tourist trap last summer. Then she put an envelope on top, like she was placing a baby chick somewhere safe. I found this in his closet, she said. I didn't know what to do, but I didn't want him to decide without you knowing. Inside was a tiny navy ring box. My throat closed. The ring itself was simple and pretty, exactly my taste in a way that made me want to scream. The receipt was folded under the cushion like a secret. Date, February 14th. My fingers started to shake and I had to put it back, because it was either laugh or throw it across the room, and I couldn't be the woman throwing jewelry at his mother's fireplace. She touched my arm like she wanted to fix it all, and we both cried quietly for a minute in that tidy hallway that suddenly felt like a stage set. I left the box with her. Walking down the driveway, I thought about him buying a ring and then sleeping with someone else and then lighting candles for me like he was, making the world's most coordinated magic trick. That night, Paula texted me, just 5 words, "Can you talk? I'm late." I hadn't seen her since the day everything blew up. We met in the parking lot of a pharmacy like we were teenagers again. We bought the tests and she followed me back to my house because she didn't want to do it alone and she didn't want to do it where her son might find her. We stood shoulder to shoulder at my bathroom sink, the two of us watching the little window like we were waiting for a verdict. 2 lines. It felt like the breath got sucked out of that tiny room and into some other universe. She sat down on the edge of my tub and buried her face in her hands, and I just rubbed circles on her back and handed her tissues like that could maybe fix something. When she finally looked up, her eyes were red but steady. "I'm going to keep it," she said. "I don't want to, but I do. Does that make sense?" It did, horribly. She asked me to be there when she told him. I didn't know if that was a terrible idea or the only way to keep it from becoming a performance. I said yes. She chose to tell him at her place, on the front step, because she wanted walls around her that belonged to her. He showed up 20 minutes late, like he was staging his own entrance. He saw me and blinked like I was a mirage, then looked at her and the color drained out of his face. She told him in 3 sentences. He went through it all like he was flipping radio stations: shock, denial, anger, and then something that looked almost like awe. He reached for her hand and she pulled it back. He looked at me like I was an interpreter who could translate him into a decent man. He started to say my name and I cut him off. "This isn't about me," I said. "It's about the two of you and a baby. Make a plan. Be honest. Be a father." My voice sounded weird in my own ears, too calm for the little earthquake happening behind my ribs. He asked about counseling again, and I actually laughed. It slipped out before I could stop it. Paula flinched. He said he wanted to do the right thing and kept looking at me like I held the definition of what that was. I told him he already knew it, he'd known it for 2 years, and he just hadn't liked how boring it sounded. He texted me later that night, a long string of sentences I didn't read. I blocked his number. It felt like sliding a window down against a storm. The next morning, his son texted me a photo of his breakfast, a lopsided stack of pancakes shaped like a dinosaur. "Grandma made these," he wrote. "They're supposed to be a T-Rex." My heart folded in half. I told him they were excellent, which they were. He asked if I was coming to his game on Saturday. I stared at the screen until the words swam and finally told him I couldn't come for a while, but that I was so proud of him. He sent me a thumbs up and a little blue heart, and I had to sit down on the kitchen floor because the tile felt like the only thing steady in my house. In the quiet that followed, his mother called again. She'd taken him to task, she said. She'd also told the hockey association he needed to step back from coaching for the season to get his home in order. I heard the careful phrasing and the steel underneath it. "I'm sorry," she said, and I could hear she meant for me and for the whole mess arranged like dominoes around her grandson. I thought that might be the strangest thing I'd do this week, standing on another woman's porch while we told a man he'd gotten her pregnant. But grief is weirdly creative. A real estate agent called me out of nowhere, someone we'd met months ago when we were walking through houses and making jokes about closet space. "I didn't know if you wanted this info," she said carefully, "but he put in an offer on 7th Avenue. The one with the goofy wallpaper you loved? He wrote a note about wanting a family home." I sat very still and then thanked her for telling me, because it felt like watching someone steal your dreams haircut and wear it to a job interview. I drove by later, slow enough not to be creepy. There were new curtains in the windows. From the street, it looked like a postcard of a life. I parked around the corner, choked on nothing for a minute, and then laughed out loud alone in my car, because of course he wanted the house with the wallpaper. Of course he did. I went home and unfriended his entire family in a single, miserable sweep. I thought it would feel vindicating. It felt like dropping rocks into a lake and waiting for the splash. I kept his son's contact, because I couldn't bring myself to erase a child. I don't know what the right thing is there, maybe there isn't one. Paula and I went to her first appointment together. She asked and I said yes because it turns out I am a person who will sit in an OB waiting room with the other woman and count ceiling tiles to keep from crying. The tech turned the screen away like she was pulling a curtain, and then the room filled with a sound like a hummingbird trapped in a jar. I didn't realize I was crying until Paula handed me a tissue and laughed, this strange, beautiful sound that was half terror and half joy. "Hi," she whispered to the little blur on the screen, and I swear you could feel the world rearranging itself around those 3 letters. On the way out, we walked past a rack of pamphlets about co-parenting and child support and domestic peace orders, the whole spectrum of what happens next. She took the one she needed, and we stood in the parking lot, 2 women holding onto our own small pieces of dignity like they were life vests. "I don't know how to do this," she said. "Me neither," I admitted. "But we will. I don't know what his life will look like from here. Maybe he'll buy that house and paint over the wallpaper and put up a Christmas tree and make pancakes shaped like dinosaurs. Maybe he'll learn something he should have learned years ago. I only know this, I don't belong in that picture." I went home, signed up for adult skate lessons on a whim, and bought myself a hot chocolate from the rink canteen because apparently I am still petty enough to make that moment mine. It tasted like nothing special, but it was hot and it was mine and no one had to think to offer it to me. That felt like more than enough right now. Update 3. I was halfway through my first adult skate lesson when the world tilted in a way that had nothing to do with my ankles. The rink smelled like cold metal and rubber, the sound of blades scratching rhythm into the air, and my phone buzzed inside my coat like a trapped bee. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail, then it rang again and something in me answered out of old muscle memory. "Is this my name? You're listed as emergency contact for his son. He fell at recess, we think his wrist. We can't reach his father." I had a rental skate still on one foot and my own boot on the other when I was in the car. I left my laces in a sad knot in the passenger seat, the ice smell clinging to my hair. At the school, he was sitting very small on a plastic chair with a tiny dinosaur ice pack tied to his arm like a ridiculous badge. He saw me and his shoulders dropped like I'd pressed a magic button, and I hated that it was my name and not his father's that did that today. The nurse was kind and brisk. "Relationship?" she asked, pen hovering. I said family friend because it felt less like a lie than anything else. We went to urgent care. There was a fish tank with tired-looking guppies and a poster about washing your hands that made us both snort. He kept apologizing for crying and I told him that bones are allowed to hurt and that bravery isn't quiet, sometimes it sounds like snot. He laughed into my sleeve and then made himself sit up straighter. The X-ray tech had warm hands. "Hairline fracture," the doctor said like he was declaring a weather report. "You picked a good one." He got to choose his cast color. "Blue," he said without hesitating, And then looked at me like he remembered the little blue heart he'd sent, and I had to look at the ceiling for a second so the world wouldn't slosh out of my eyes. His father arrived in a gust of breath and apology, coach jacket half zippered, laces trailing from his shoes like he'd tried to outrun himself to the door. He put a hand on my elbow like we were some kind of team, and I moved it off without being loud about it. The boy watched us with those old, thoughtful eyes kids get when the adults in their life stop making sense. We went into the hallway, and he started to say my name, like that was a map. "I'm going to call the school and ask them to take me off the list," I said, calm like I practiced. "You need to put your people down. I can't be your people anymore, not like this." He flinched like I'd flicked light at him. He nodded, and then I watched him not understand, and then understand anyway. On the way out, his mother, the boy's grandmother, came in with a soft roar of worry, her purse unzipped and a bottle of hand sanitizer making a break for it. She squeezed my hand so hard my rings imprinted a little row of moons into my fingers. "Thank you," she whispered like she was borrowing breath from me. "I know," I whispered back, which was a lie and a prayer at once. I sat in the car with the heat on and my boots still off and made the call to the school. The secretary said of course, and typed me out of their system. I stared at the phone like it might congratulate me. Instead, an email slid into my inbox from our old real estate agent, the subject line careful, "I'm sorry if this is overstepping." She'd forwarded the love letter he'd written with his offer on 7th Avenue. It was all there in black and white, our life chopped up and sautéed like it was his to serve. "My girlfriend loves the wallpaper," he wrote, like he'd picked it out with me last weekend and not on a day when his mouth was still sweet from someone else. "Our 3 kids will race down the hall on Christmas morning. I coach hockey on Saturdays." There was even a sentence about pancakes, which I'm sure played well with whoever was reading. Some nice seller imagining syrup and laughter and a dad who doesn't forget hot chocolates. I laughed out loud alone in my car because I didn't know what else to do. The sound startled me, it was sharp and it was mean and it belonged to me. I printed the letter when I got home and used it as a test strip for wallpaper paste because apparently I'm the kind of woman who turns other people's fantasies into lining for a junk drawer. Then I walked to the hardware store 3 blocks over and found, in the clearance bin like a prank, a single dusty roll of the exact wallpaper from 7th Avenue, the goofy pattern I loved. "Discontinued," the guy said, surprised, as if I was making a rare bird migrate back for me. I took it home. I watched a video of a woman with a calm voice smoothing bubbles down. I cut the first strip crooked and swore, then laughed, then kept going. The seam is a little off if you look too closely, which I will try not to. It's ridiculous and perfect on one wall of my tiny hallway. Every time I walk past it, it whispers mine like a spell. At some point, my doorbell rang and there was Paula on the steps with a grocery store bouquet pressed awkwardly to her chest like a shield. Lilies, the kind that will dust your nose with orange if you lean too close. I let her in. We sat on my kitchen floor because chairs felt too formal and the floor was honest. "He brought the ring," she said, staring at a scuff on my baseboard like it had something to say about all of this. "He said we should do it right for the baby. He said he could get us in the house if we looked like a family on paper." She laughed this small, tired laugh that had sharp edges to it. I told him I would rather live in a studio above a dollar store than in a house built on a lie. He didn't like that aesthetic. We talked about mediators and calendars and child support and all the unromantic scaffolding that actually holds a life up. I gave her the name of someone my friend used when her ex thought verbal agreement meant my way. She asked me if I would come to the first meeting and I watched the urge in me to say yes rise like a tide and just as quickly recede. "I can't sit in a room with the 2 of you and pretend I'm furniture," I said. "You can do this. I will be here, but not there." She nodded, then nodded again, like she was fastening it inside herself. That night, through the wall, I could hear my upstairs neighbor practicing scales on his trumpet, each note a little braver than the last. My phone buzzed on the table. A photo of a blue cast from a number that wasn't blocked, because I hadn't been able to do it. His son. "T-Rex arm," he wrote. Then, "Thank you." I sent back a dinosaur and a heart and then stared at the screen until it dimmed. I wrote to his grandmother and asked her to be the buffer from now on. She responded with a thank you and a heart and the exact number of words you use when you understand something sad and necessary. The next morning, I went back to the rink. The instructor remembered my name and put a hand out like a circus ringmaster bringing in a skittish horse. "We're going to learn how to stop without the boards," she said, grinning. I pushed, bent, felt my blades grab and shiver, and there I was, just me, not crashing, not reaching for anything to hold me up. I bought my own skates from the pro shop after, white with ridiculous pink guards that clicked into place like the lid on a secret. On the way out, the woman at the canteen leaned over and said she liked my jacket, which is nothing, except it was something. By afternoon, another email. The agent again. "Deal fell through," she wrote. "Inspection. Foundation." I pictured that house, those bright curtains in the front windows, and underneath, the truth-cracking things in lines no one wanted to see. I wrote back and said I wasn't looking anymore. Not for a while. She said she understood. She probably actually did. A week later, I stood in my hallway with a roll of painter's tape in my mouth, my kids arguing about who got to put the next dinosaur sticker on their chart, the trumpet upstairs laughing at itself, and it felt like my life had shifted 5 inches to the left and found a stud. The wallpaper seam is still crooked. I'm not fixing it. Every time I catch it out of the corner of my eye, I remember that I can build something ugly and right, just for me, and leave the door open for exactly who I want to see it. Update 4. A man with a cautious mustache and a folder held like a newborn showed up at my door on a Tuesday morning while I was wearing socks that didn't match and a t-shirt with a coffee stain that looked like Australia. He said my name the way you say it when you've checked it 3 times. You've been listed as a witness, he said, and the envelope was heavier than it needed to be. I had to sit on the bottom stair to read it, because apparently my staircase is my courtroom now. Temporary orders. Support. Parenting plan. The little gears and pulleys that get installed when the heart makes a mess the calendar has to clean up. I showed up to the courthouse with a printout for parking that lied and a stomach full of dry toast. The waiting area smelled like lemon cleaner and old sweaters, and there was a vending machine with exactly 1 hot chocolate left, which felt on the nose enough that I didn't buy it. Paula was already there, a folder on her lap so thick it had its own spine, her hand steadier than I would have bet. His mother sat on her other side, composed the way only women who've had to stop themselves from solving everything can be composed. He arrived in a suit that tried too hard and a face that didn't. He saw me and his mouth did that hopeful twist like maybe I was there to translate again. I sat behind Paula and looked at the back of her head and thought, yes, that's where I belong if I belong anywhere at all in this room. It's funny, the things you notice when your life is being measured. The judge had a cup of coffee with a lipstick half moon, the clock on the wall ticked loud enough to cut bread, the bailiff had a band-aid printed with little sharks on his finger and it made him look like someone's uncle instead of the person who says all rise with a voice like a door shutting. When it was my turn, it wasn't dramatic. I raised my right hand and told the truth the way you'd read a recipe out loud to someone you care about, clearly, without skipping the parts that make the whole thing hold together. Dates. Times. The thin little bridges between what he said and where he was. No adjectives, even though they were burning holes in my pocket. His lawyer tried out a few words like complicated and transition and non-exclusive, and I watched the judge's eyebrows climb one careful rung and stop. Paula's lawyer slid the ring receipt across like a punchline to a joke that didn't know it was funny, and then, and this part I didn't expect, the seller's love letter that the real estate agent had forwarded me was Exhibit C. Reading our 3 kids will race down the hall on Christmas morning in courier font under a gold seal in a room full of strangers was so absurd I bit my lip hard enough to taste metal. The judge didn't smile, but he did that thing with his mouth like disappointment had a place to sit there. Orders were made, the kind that sound boring and are actually the bones of a future, classes to take, money to be paid, dates circled, a sentence about communication that might as well have been a dare. In the hallway after, he put his hand on the wall near my shoulder the way men do in movies and not in real life when the woman used to love them. Counseling? He said, small. It was the first time I felt sorry for the word itself. This isn't your scene, I said as gently as I knew how. You have your own show to run now. His mother slid between us like a weather system and took his elbow, and for a second, he looked 14 and lost in a grocery store. That night, my phone lit up with Paula's name, and I held my breath without meaning to. Spotting, her text read. At ER. With his mother. You don't have to come. Just wanted you to know. It was a sentence that felt like a hinge. I stared at the screen until the angle changed and then wrote back, I'm here if you need words. You've got people in the room. A hummingbird heartbeat again, she said an hour later, relieved and shaky in punctuation. He showed up late with flowers that looked like they came with a pre-printed apology and his mother's expression behind him like a lighthouse beam trying to teach a rock empathy. In the morning, I went to the rink. The ice had been cut so recently it looked smug, the Zamboni lines neat as a haircut. We're going to try backward C cuts, my instructor said brightly, as if she was suggesting we adopt a cat. I pushed and pushed again and felt the backs of my blades answer me like we were finally speaking the same language. I didn't need the boards. No one clapped, of course, but something in me did. I bought a hot chocolate afterwards like I was buying stock in my own small economy and wrote my name on the lid because sometimes you have to see your name in your own handwriting to believe you're still the person who gets to decide. 2 days later, a package showed up on my doormat wrapped in brown paper that had definitely been someone's grocery bag in a former life. No return address, just a wobbly T-Rex drawn in blue marker on the front like a heraldry. Inside, a set of dinosaur cookie cutters and a note in the careful printing of a boy who takes spelling tests seriously. For your kitchen so you can make T-Rex pancakes too, it said. From me. There was a heart drawn so hard the paper almost tore. I sat on the floor right there in the doorway and pressed the note to my face until the ink warmed from my breath. I texted his grandmother and asked if she would give him a thank you from me and help me be the quiet kind of there. She wrote back, of course, and I believed her. The trumpet upstairs has been practicing the same song for a week, something old and mournful that sounds like watching rain through a screen door, and he knocked once to ask if the noise was too much. I told him it was exactly right, and he played one verse soft and sweet right there in the hallway like a neighbor blessing. My kids took turns pinning a new dinosaur sticker to the chart in the kitchen and I used one of the cookie cutters on grilled cheese because why not? It felt like cheating, in a way that didn't hurt anybody. Paula came by with a calendar and a face that looked like she'd slept a full night for the first time in months. We did the mediator, she said. It was awful and good. He took notes like he was learning a sport he's not naturally good at. She laughed, small, and put the calendar between us like a treaty. I can do the naming appointment alone, she said, and I realized she meant the one where you put actual words on a baby's birth certificate and also the one where she names what she needs without translation. I'll be outside after, I promised, and we both understood how big that boundary was. At some point this week, I took the last piece of the love letter that I'd been using in my junk drawer and cut it into a thin strip to line the tray where I keep batteries and 3 kinds of tape I can never find when I need them. The wallpaper in the hallway glowed peach in the 5 o'clock sun and I walked past it and it said mine again like it knew. The assignment. On Saturday, the rink played a playlist from someone's high school and I skated to a song I loved when I thought love was going to be easier than aim, and I stopped in the middle of the ice without touching anything. I am learning to be the kind of person who can stop without a wall. I am buying my own hot chocolate. I am leaving rooms calm and occasionally with grace. The seam in the wallpaper is still crooked. I run my thumb along it on purpose now, like a worry stone, like a reminder that even the lines I can't make perfect can still hold up a whole wall.